adjustments we took out of year 4 and year 5. Learning from the other companies and seeing how they went about their prices can help Andrews get out of the hole. So, out of the whole aspect and everything that is broken down, the market share, the profits, the return on investments, the whole picture is more important than just seeing how the company is under at that point. There's a lot of good things that's going on in Andrews, and for them to continue to move forward, there's going to be adjustments that need to be made. So more research is crucial to add more products moving forward. There comes an important time when being aggressive is too much, but creating the perfect product to be able to continue to compete in the market and find different ways for Andrews to get the profits higher is going to be important. So out of the market share, it's not too low, but there's important room to be made up. There's a bunch of different aspects that can be made from Andrews, and finding different ways to go out and get new products and sell them at the right pace is going to be important moving forward in year 6.
All right, so let's discuss a little bit about our production schedules that happened in year 4 and in year 5. For our production schedules, we always took the liberty of looking at what the predicted forecast was going to be for sales. So going into hand in hand with the marketing side of this as well, we use that a lot to be able to determine how much inventory we should create and to keep on hand moving into the following year as well. Sometimes we did fall a little bit short of that, but then sometimes we had plenty left over to be able to move and to not cause as much on our expenses as well in our finances side for the current or for the following year. But then there were times that we did fall that little bit short, or there were sometimes we hit it dead on that we were perfect in our scheduling as well. I always think of taking that risk as well is very important when it comes to scheduling and creating your production line, because you really have no idea what's going to happen from year to year as far as your production schedule goes. You can forecast and you can guess as close as you can get and calculate as close to the dollar as you can get with it, but sometimes it doesn't always come out that way. But we did seem to do pretty well in that regard for the most part, especially in year 4. We did have some really good sales, but we did have some excess inventory as well with that leading into year 5. We did actually see to have more capacity than production that was actually scheduled, which was a downfall on our side, but it did help us going into year 5 that we did not have to create as much as well or make adjustments to our capacity from there. The selling price, we did always try to work to decrease our selling price of our products from year to year, just as our consumers always said that they would like to see moving forward. We would just make small adjustments to see how the market would react to those different prices. But then luckily our labor and material costs were able to increase a little bit and then decrease in some areas that helped us be able to decide that pricing and help better suit our production schedule for year 4. And then going into year 5, immediately following that, again, we had some really good sales. We did have some regular leftover inventory as well from going into year 5. Unfortunately, not having a year 6 of this simulation did hurt us a little bit in that we had quite a bit of capacity left over. So you can see from the chart there for the production versus capacity, we did have quite a bit more capacity over our production schedule there. With that being said, though, our labor and material costs really stayed consistent throughout this whole process. So we were able to keep that pretty regular and be able to offer our products at the same price, if not lowering again, like we tried to back in year 4. And then also I like to point out here that as well at the bottom of that chart under the production information to the far right under all of our different products, you can see that over with 2 of them, Adams and AF, we were able to use over 100% of our plant utilization, which I think is very important for our company. There were a couple of our different products that did not use as much, which would be Able and Acre. But with that too, Agape was following very, very close behind with that 92%. So with you can see, we can really have been utilizing our resources and our tools here on our production line as well. But we definitely would like to think if there was a possibility for a year 6, we would have been able to really help and cap that capacity versus production schedule that you guys can see in that chart there up top. And just kind of an overall conclusion of our production schedule for this simulation. Some negatives that we did see through our production scheduling was we would find ourselves to not have as much inventory on hand as the production was scheduled. Like I said before, we could follow based off of the forecasting, and sometimes we would fall short, sometimes we would over predict as well. Unfortunately, there would be times that we would lose out on cash just due to the fact of not having as much inventory on hand. So we try to make those adjustments from year to year to be able to prevent that from happening, but then sometimes you just can't prevent it as well. Sometimes we, again, just kind of concluding with that too, with not having enough inventory on hand from year to year. Sometimes we would also, on the other hand, have too much of it that we would have to decrease in areas of not creating as much on the production schedule for that specific year and then fall short in the following year too. It is definitely a learning process of figuring out how to gauge that production schedule. Once we get a pretty good fix of it, of how it needs to be set, we can take care of it moving forward as well. Some of the negatives are selling prices did not fluctuate from year to year always. We tried our best to create that as much as possible. Unfortunately, to be able to reach that financial net income being a positive figure at the end of financial statements, we did need that selling price to stay pretty consistent. We did try to make some adjustments to help our consumers. That would have been something I would have liked to seen if we could have moved into a year 6 as well, of trying to decrease that selling price to help to see if it would attract more consumers moving forward with our products. But some positives overall. I mean, yes, we had several negatives of this situation, of this department. But we did provide a schedule of inventory based on the forecasted needed in most areas. We were able to follow that schedule pretty well. There were just some bumps that we hit along the way, as I discussed beforehand. And also, too, I think it's important to point out that our labor and material costs stayed pretty steady from year to year. We were able to keep those pretty consistent with our research and development team as well through Alyssa. And we were able to keep those different costs staying the same, so that way it didn't hinder us more on our financials as well. So then moving right into finances for year 4 and for year 5 as well. As you can see, I have our financial summary from the Capstone Courier as well provided in these different slides here. As you can see, we did have a loss for net income for year 4. And we unfortunately did have to have an emergency loan for that. We did take an inventory loss in this year. And our assets were also known as being the lowest among our competitors, as you can see from the comparative financial statement there between all of our competitors in our market. But however, I think it is good important to point out too, even though we did have to have an emergency loan, looking at the different competitors that we have here, we still have a very small long-term debt for our company. So even though we unfortunately had to take that emergency loan, it was there and accessible. That way we were able to pull ourselves out of that hole pretty quickly moving into year 5. So obviously round 4 was not great as far as financials go, but we did definitely reevaluate as an executive director's team at looking at the finances and as far as making adjustments to all of our different departments to see if we can hopefully do better moving into the next fiscal year for year 5. Unfortunately, when year 5 came around, we did not hit that and hit our goal that we wanted to, but it would be definitely in the works to hit in year 6. We still hit that negative net income loss there. Luckily, it did not move very much past what it was in year 4. So I think that is positive. We should have worked maybe a little bit harder to try to get us more further out of that loss period, but at least we didn't move too heavily backwards as well. Our depreciation, though, when you look at our depreciation schedule of our equipment and our different materials here at Andrew's company, we actually have the low depreciation cost compared to all of our competitors. We do have still an inventory loss, as kind of described again from the production schedule loss. And then unfortunately too, because of that negative net income loss there, we were issued a second emergency loan, leaving our cash at a $0 profit for the year. So again, financials for round 5, we took the risk, we did our best to try to get us out of that hole. Unfortunately, we did fall a little bit short of that, but kind of to move forward as a learning experience for finance, I think it's important to think that, year to year, you're not always going to have a great year in finances, but it's important to see what you can do moving into the following year to make changes to those different departments to make those situations better. And then finance overall, I'd like to just kind of touch a little bit from round 1 to round 5 real quick on our finance statements as well. As you can see, our net income did stay at a negative throughout all these different years through that. As you can see, it progressively did not get better. And I think a lot of this still evolves around that production schedule as well. Our depreciation, as you can see, did kind of fluctuate throughout the different rounds as well. And then also our inventory. We had some good years throughout year round 3 and round 4. And then you can see we had some different ones fall throughout it as well in round 1, 4, and 5. For the majority, our cash flow from our operations did fluctuate as well. And I think that's the majority of what our financial statements look over. I always like to think that it almost looks like hills and valleys throughout with the Andrews Company. But looking forward into some positives here that we would like to highlight. Cash from our financing in round 5 was sitting at 20,982, which had been the best that it had been since round 1. So I do believe we were working to be able to hit that positive net income goal as we needed to. If we could have just possibly had one more fiscal year to have been able to do that, I believe we would have been able to hit that for our finances. And just to touch real fast on some human resources that we did here at Andrews as well. For years 4 and 5, we stayed pretty consistent throughout all of our years with our HR training. We did see that our turnover rate seemed to stay pretty low. That ranged usually from a 9 to 12% turnover rate, which we thought was pretty fantastic for our company as well, for having over 900 some employees. But we also work to provide 12 hours of training per year and per employee for the employees here at Andrews.
Okay, for TQM years, 4 and 5, we invested $1,500 in each of the categories for round 4. And then in round 5, we did not invest anything, but we had the same results. And out of all of the companies, we had the highest percentages in each category for the cumulative impacts.
So to wrap up our discussion with the board members, there's some positives that we took away from this and some negatives that Andrews was able to learn from and better themselves from moving forward. So one, company strides were made, but Andrews has some work to do to be able to compete in a crowded market. There's a lot of good companies right now, and they're finding ways to compete and profit in a market that's crowded. So there's no reason that Andrews isn't able to do this. We're going to learn from what worked well in round 4 and what round 5 and what didn't work well, and go off of that and be able to find ways to make our profit continue to grow and find different ways to keep raising the market share. Also, new products priced at the correct market demand will be a massive stepping stone for Andrews in the near future. So taking the products that we're currently selling right now and what are working and continue to move forward with that, and also finding different ways to find new products and push them out into the market and find different consumers that way. Finally, a possible strategic plan after breaking down what other companies are doing for 3 to 5 years down the road can be advantageous for Andrews as a whole. So breaking down a plan and having different reasons why we do things is something that's going to help Andrews out really well. Thank you for coming today. Makyla, Alyssa, and I really appreciate it. And we hope that you enjoyed what we had for you. All right, stop share. How do I stop recording?